Hey everyone! So looking back on a lot of my videos, I've realized I've done an awful lot of explaining, and that's the type of writing I really wanted to talk to you guys about today, which is going to be expository writing. And I know a lot of people oftentimes think explain, expository, or expository, explain, but it goes a little bit more in depth with the definition of expository writing. So just keep in mind that expository writing does have to do with explaining, but it can also have to do with detailing, offering information, or just simply informing a general audience on something through written expression or through speaking. There are certain cases when it's appropriate to use expository writing and other cases when it's not really needed. Sometimes people have the bad habit of giving context when somebody already understands something and they just want to hear the narrative or a story. For example, if I told you about an experience I had where I got to meet a manatee, you probably wouldn't want to know about the scientific evidence based around manatees. You'd probably just say, get to the point, I want to hear your story. And in that case, we would go with narrative. We also wouldn't want to go with anything persuasive because I shouldn't be trying to convince you of something. It's just simply looking for information, which is what we're going to be focusing on simply with expository writing. Some things to keep in mind. Here is a brief list of some examples where you would oftentimes see expository writing taking place. You would oftentimes see expository writing in textbook writing, how-to articles or presentations, recipes, news stories. These do not include opinion or editorial pieces where people tend to lean one way and try to convince people of others. That would definitely lean more towards persuasion. And the last one would be business, technical, or just scientific writing in general. I break down expository writing into two scenarios. One would be explaining how to, as in sequencing through steps, through chronological order. It'd have to go in order, and there are two ways to do that. One of the ways would simply be stating a series of steps, first, second, third, and so on until you reach a final product or destination of some point. The other way to sequence is just through simple syntax and word choice. Oftentimes you'll be explaining something and you don't really want to list them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Instead, we can use words like first, next, then, after that, finally, or lastly. We're going to be working on those sequencing words and figuring out when it's appropriate to use them at what points during a written expressive piece. The second way you can use expository writing is simply to give context. Sometimes when we're trying to explain something, how to do something in a series, first they need to know simply what is it that you're talking about, and so we would need to actually explain a concept or a subject to a generalized audience who may simply not know what's going on. This would be from taking a simple subject and simply building on the complexity until you have either an understanding or a finished product that someone can go with after they've learned that information. Here are a few things to consider while using expository writing or just speaking in an expository way. An introduction begins with a hook. You have to grab the attention, and the main idea or your thesis statement should be present. You shouldn't be afraid to offer background information. Again, don't just assume that your audience knows what you're talking about. Do not generalize your audience. Sometimes they need to metaphorically have their hand held through something so they can understand what it is you're trying to talk about. Don't be afraid to offer commentary. Why do you do this step next? Or why is this information good to know? Maybe this would be a safety feature, or maybe it will save people time, or maybe you just have a past experience of something that has occurred and you found something that works better. It's always good to explain. When in doubt, give context. Third thing to consider would be to use evidence. You can use quotes, data, statistics, facts, or just simply proof to include in your commentary. You still want to be credible even though you're not actually writing a persuasive piece. You want someone to look at this and say, hey, this person, I can believe them. I find them to be trustworthy and I'm going to follow their list of steps because I trust what they are saying. The last thing to consider in my opinion, would be to conclude your entire expository statement as a restatement of your thesis. Oh, and this is how you do this. Like, reiterate that. People like knowing, okay, now I know how to thread a needle. Now I know how to perform a move in color guard. You have to provide context. Again, always, always, always go back to explaining. Even if it seems simplistic, somebody somewhere is going to appreciate that you took the time to explain something that may seem small, where they can now learn more, to something where it could be complex. Do not include new information at this time. If you start to include new information, your reader or viewer or whoever you're speaking to is going to want to stop you and say, well, why didn't you tell me that to begin with? So don't just add new information. Any new information should be in the body of your text, or simply during the conversation, or somewhere in the middle where you're providing all those sequencing words. Otherwise, it can get confusing and suddenly you have somebody backtracking saying, well, I don't know where that last statement came from. How am I supposed to do this? I need more. I need more explanation. And that would just make more work on yourself. So always go back, give context in a series of steps. Don't ever provide new information in your conclusion. I will be making 2 new videos on expository writing just to give you guys an example of a how-to using sequencing, where I will explain how you can thread a needle to prepare to hand stitch something with sewing. My other video is going to focus on more of the explaining and giving context before I move on into a series of sequencing steps on how to do something regarding my favorite sport, which is color guard, and how to do a move using a flag. That's all I have for you guys today. Make sure you bring in your notes. I will definitely be taking a look at them, and I'm really excited to move into this next unit with you guys. Don't be afraid to learn. Bye guys.